Hi, Diana. We're going to take a look at your emotive squares posting, offer some observations, some feedback, that type of thing. So let's go ahead and share the screen here and get going. So first of all, good, you named it properly. I would offer maybe your last name on there. There may be other Dianas in the group. There aren't in this class. However, it's always going to be a good idea to offer just a little bit more. You never want your work to be mistaken for someone else's, and you always want your name attached to what it is you're doing. So Diana's fine. I mean, I know who you are, but I think if we added maybe your last initial, or the other way around, even just did your first initial and your last name or something like that could work. But in the future, just try that, and that will be just a little point for future reference as you're working. So seeing your work, basically we've got this thing broken down into two components. The first is the arrangement of the squares, and then the actual photographs. And one of them is the formal exercise, where you're taking the information about arranging certain positive elements, which is the squares of varying sizes and stuff like that. And then the second component is more of the personal vision component, which is how you're seeing it. And here's the reason that those two things exist that way. So everybody in the class, all 11 people, are offering, offered the same information, the same 5 topics, the same size squares on a flat surface. So the arrangement is oftentimes going to be duplicated, or at least duplicated kind of closely. You're going to see your arrangement of some of the squares might be closely related to somebody else's arrangements of the squares. You have maybe already observed that when you went and did your reviews. And so the second part, where you're getting your camera in there and you're actually now reframing and recomposing a little bit, that's where you're going to have the personal sort of side, because that's where you come in and you're viewing something as the final result of that. So looking at these, that's the first component, is what is the difference between the first element and then the other. And in some ways, it looks like your approach was to document at first the grouping of the squares without any other consideration. You're just showing us the squares, right? So this is just showing us the squares and, the shadow of your tripod. But here we're just seeing the squares, and there's no activation here. In fact, the tripod is probably activating the composition better than the squares themselves. And that's neither criticism or anything. That is just observation. These squares aren't really participating in the whole composition. Here and here they are. Here and here they are. And it's not just because they're bigger, but it's because the shapes engage the entire frame. From here to here in my picture is my entire frame, and from here to here is my entire frame, right? So I want to, when I'm composing, I'm looking at this as my frame, I want to compose this entire space and this entire space. So you're doing that as you've zoomed in. As you come closer to these squares, you're discovering, wait, at this distance, that's when the squares begin to engage the entire frame. And that's where they get a better energy to them. Now, with your tensions, there's some things that you want to do where tension is effectively energy that are kind of coming close together and they're being held apart, or energy that's being pulled apart in some way that's trying to hold together. Right? Energy that's trying to hold together. And oddly, I rarely see anybody do that, but you've got that kind of going on here, where it almost feels like we're trying to reverse the tension out, right? You're trying to pull instead of push. And most everybody use tension about pushing. And yours in this one happened to be pulling, even though this one is still a little bit too far away to engage. This one does a pretty good job. Maybe if we had just a little bit more energy right in here on this one, you can get there. Maybe if there was a little gap or something between here where you could see it kind of almost peeling apart, you know, that might be where you're getting that energy. But fantastic that you thought to go the other way, because I don't think, at least so far, I've got maybe 3 more reviews to do after yours, but I don't think I've seen anybody do that yet. Here you're doing the forward tension, and again, the most effective is going to be this one where you're engaging the whole picture plane. Lonely. Now, lonely is a comparative as well. Lonely by itself, someone by themselves, isn't necessarily lonely. I'm by myself in the frame. But this certainly doesn't mean lonely just because I'm the only thing. Of course, I have this little kind of decorative element behind me because I did think it was too blank of a composition. And so I set up my studio here in the office to include something like that. So anyway, being a comparative thing, it's not just about removing something. It's about removing something and getting it to feel somehow, getting it to translate as somehow an emotive quality to that, right? Not just isolated, but lonely. What's the difference? Isolated is proximity. Lonely is an emotion. And so isolated might be something like this, right? Because here you have an element, but it just sort of, this is isolated out here. There's no sort of interaction necessarily between these two elements where they feel like this one is maybe cast off or anything. I think you're getting closest here because we're getting more of a sense of the group and then the other, right? The group and then the other. And the reason that this is, goodness, let's come back to that. See if I can find it. Didn't mean to scroll through like that. The group, and the reason that this is because all of these elements, save this one, maybe this one could be tilted a little bit more, and this, so could this one, but they're all oriented slightly differently than the little guy down here. That each of these is askew a little bit, kind of, and then like that. And then the one that is isolated isn't just removed, but it's also different in the way it's oriented. That's an important thing to differentiate the emotive quality, right? Everyone is tilted this way, and then this one happens to be just sort of structured right there. Now, this one, I really do like that you took the chance to get it to run off the edge like that. But I think we're still a little bit too far away here, that if we were closer and this still did run off the edge, that it would be effective. Good job to put it on the edge. That's excellent. But I still think we're a little bit too far away on a lot of your compositions. Might have been your camera. You didn't feel like you could get close enough with your camera to do that. And it could have been a technical thing that you just, this is as close as you could get, but we never want that to get in the way of effective designs. Playful, again, I'm glad you didn't go by way of illustration. A lot of folks I've seen where they're starting to do smiley faces or, you know, fireworks explosions or something. And the difference between the illustration and the design really has to do with the potential of interpretation. Does this have a potential to be sort of thought of by multiple people in different ways, rather than just, if I show you a smiley face, you're just going to think smiley face, and that's going to give you a certain a certain feeling. Now, playful, I think, is getting best across in something like this, where there's a little bit of a pattern and organization happening, because most games and most times when people are playing, it's not just a random free-for-all, it's somewhat organized, right? Play is not necessarily something where it's just random chaos. If you go to a playground, kids are sort of grouped, and they tend to be doing things of a somewhat orderly fashion. So I think that's why this one may be working better. And again, by building up these large shapes that kind of come off the edge, you're getting really close to the entire picture plane, which I think is a much better strategy. All right, now heavy. This one is these are all, fairly good, but this one really works quite well. Now, why does this one work quite well? Couple of things that we've already addressed. The first is you're engaging the picture plane. You're activating the space. Now, of course, gosh, I don't mean to get there like that. Let's see. Come back again. got to stop putting my finger on the top of my mouse when I'm circling. So here, what is going on here? You've got some negative space up here, but it's not so much that that it seems like acreage, right? You're close enough now that it seems like that has a potential to participate in the composition. But even more so, by having this space and then having the main elements down at the bottom here, what you're doing is you are giving weight to the composition. You're shifting the balance to a lower element, which automatically makes something feel heavy, right? If I'm up here like this, or down here like this, if I'm down like this, it feels heavy. If I put my head under this and I'm kind of doing that, this is heavier now, right? So the idea is to bring the weight down, and you're doing that in this composition. Another is this use of negative space down here, which is creating a bit of tension, which is helping with the energy. It does feel that this thing is trying to hold all of these things up, and that something bad is about to happen here. There's lots of energy, plenty of tension here. You got them running off the edge. That's why this one works really, really well. Good job on that. You're doing some similar thing with this, but it's not as effective as here. And then here we kind of get away from it again, where you're isolating shapes a little bit too much. Congested. Now, congested is movement that is being stopped. Lots of kind of thought goes into these, into these prompts, and the difference between, tension and congested, right? That and on the surface, you're thinking, what's the difference, right? Tension and congestion. The difference has to do with movement. Tension is a static energy, right? That's being pulled or pushed. Congestion suggests movement, right? A linear movement that is somehow being blocked, right? Somehow being stopped, right? Like a pipe that isn't flowing properly. So that's the difference. And so you want to take time when you're first getting these topics and consider what's at the heart of those topics. What is the point, right? What is it that I'm trying to get across visually? How can it be translated into the visuals? And I'm not sure that we got there with this exploration. I think you have some fine designs. This is actually a really good design for a lot of the same reasons I was talking about on your other heavy. And this one as well. I think you're getting something really interesting there, but I'm not sure we're getting the movement that comes along with the concept of congestion. If someone was just coming to this and they did not have any idea of what the topics were, would they get congested? Not would they get congested? Would they get the idea, the topic? Would they understand that this is meant to give you that? So that's the idea behind doing these things, and hopefully you're able to take the experience of doing this work and translate it into into your next project as you're working on it. So here you've got the feedback from your peers, and you've also got your replies. Not everybody replied, and I haven't mentioned to others, and I'll mention to you what it is that you're doing here with this feedback. The feedback itself, when someone is offering you feedback, oftentimes we think about, what do we do with it, right? What am I supposed to do with the feedback? And what you're doing in a way with the reply is offering what you're doing with the feedback. So here's what happens is you make a thing, you make a work, you do a design, someone sees it and they arrive at a perspective, an observation, just like I offered you my observations. And so you're here with what you want and they land here, right? So you've got this space in between what you wanted them to get and what they got. Now, the tendency here, the idea is, well, first of all, how far away is this, right? If I want it here and here, you're thinking that's bad, right? Or if they're here and here, that's better, right? But that's not the job to determine the distance here, or even, why they didn't get it, right? Why didn't they get here? Instead, take yourself out of it altogether. You're here, they're here, take yourself away. Now just look at this. Now, and what we want you to do is consider, how do they arrive there? Forget for a moment where you wanted them to be and just how to get there, right? What are some of the things that they articulated to you that would tell you how they arrived at their observation. If you can do that, you can repeat it. If you know, I showed them XYZ, and so therefore, even though I didn't attend them, they arrived at this conclusion. Try that XYZ again and see if somebody else gets that same conclusion, right? Try the strategy that got that person to view a certain way, and don't necessarily think what you intended to do got them there, right? That's what you're trying to eke out of the conversation when someone's offering you feedback, is how did they arrive at that? And don't just presume that it was what you showed them. Maybe it's something different. Now that leads us to giving feedback, right? When you're offering feedback, what's your objective? What are you trying to do there? You're not trying to point out problems. You're not trying to correct them or tell them they're right or wonderful. What you're trying to do is offer them your perspective and maybe some insight as to how you arrived at it, right? As I was telling you the things that I was seeing, I wasn't just saying, this is bad, or this is good, or I like this. I was moving through the process of how I arrived at this works really well, and this is how I arrived at that. That feedback hopefully is very helpful to you, because then you'll understand, oh, I get it. He saw this as successful because XYZ. So if I try XYZ again, I may be able to get to the same conclusion. That's what you're trying to do when you're offering feedback to others, is you're trying to say, do XYZ because that is what I got out of it. And then the artist, if they are heads up and willing to learn, which hopefully all artists are, they're going to take that and go, okay, I can put that now into my bank. So that is what you're trying to achieve with these. You will get a numeric score. I have these handouts that I'll be giving you with your grade. But that is what I wanted to offer you in terms of giving you some observation. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you got something out of this. You'll be able to ask me further questions, clearly, on this stuff. And look forward to working with you in class some more. All right. Bye-bye now.